and good for the planet, full of good stuff like protein and amino acids. And so, yeah, we have roasted crickets. We're not going to start the show by eating them, just in case makes anybody sick, but we'll probably get to it.
We probably should bring a trash can in here.
Yes.
At some point.
So, on the last show, we had a discussion about answering prayer. Mm-hmm. And I suggested that if God's answers are yes, no, and maybe, that perhaps people should just email or send in postcards with prayers to me.
Cool.
Because I could answer them at least as effectively, if not better, than any God. And so the first postcard from here, it's got pictures of Yale on it, and it's from Dave, and it says, "Now that you answer prayers, I pray for a front row seat when I arrive for the shows on Sunday." And then he's been nice to include little boxes like yes, no, maybe. Keep up the great work. And so my original thought was I'll just say maybe. But I've decided to say yes. And Dave's right there in the front row. I have successfully answered the very first prayer that came into the Atheist Experience, and with a definitive yes. So you're very welcome, Dave. You didn't do anything to earn it or deserve it. That was a gift from God. Dear Matt, can you help me pray that? Okay, now this is already starting off a little bit wrong because God doesn't help you pray, but I'm going to assume that it's, can you help with my prayer? That the ACA will someday broadcast a live call-in show from San Diego on the shore of the Mission Bay while sipping margaritas, Coke Zero, and energy drinks with palm trees in the background, hula dancers, a military flyover, and a large luau going on all at the same time. Thank you, JMS. And I'm going to say no to that because there's no picture. I mean, this is barely a postcard. You could have just cut, let me just cut out a bit of cardboard and write some stuff on it, stick a stamp on it. Although you are being responsible.
And resourceful.
And, with recyclable stuff. So instead of a hard no, I'm going to say a maybe. And I think the military flyover is going to be the hard part. But if we wait until World War III, maybe we'll get one as well. So this one came in, and of course it has a cat. I don't even need to read it. Your answer is yes. Now, here we go. This is my prayer request. I want to pray for my hen's healing. And there's little chicken stamps all over. It's adorable. There's a pink Hello Kitty sticker, there's chicken stamp, and it's just good stuff. I want to pray for my hen's healing. She had a stroke and is limp on one side. I want her to be able to walk again. Thy will be done. Amen.
You included it. Thy will be done.
I greatly appreciate this, and I am going to focus right now and heal your hen. And if this doesn't work, it's because you lacked enough faith to allow me to do this healing. And if you send me $500, I will send you some black ants, which I will douse in a miracle healing oil to give to your chicken. And all you have to do is pray over this and the chicken for a week, and then send another $500. And then you will, if that hen does not get healed and move around properly after all of that prayer, I will send you another hen because they're way less than $1,000. Anyway, thanks everybody for playing along and doing that. I appreciate the postcards. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Did you have anything that we needed to address before we jump in on calls and do stuff?
Nah, not today.
Nope. Well, I don't know, because I like to ask before we start.
I mean, how much time do we have?
Well, the same as every week.
I guess.
Give or take.
We can talk about it real quick. There's been a song that's been stuck in my head.
Oh, boy.
You were just talking about it earlier. There's been a song that's been stuck in my head all week, and it's called Here I Am, Lord. Anybody remember that song? No? Any Catholics in here? Yeah, okay. Oh, somebody's singing it. It was a gospel song that I was one of those Catholics. I was really into it. Like, I was singing, I was in the choir, I was in the youth group, I was like very involved. And so that was one of my favorite songs. And it's like, it's been stuck in my head. And so I've been thinking about the words to it. And I'm like, oh my God, I think I figured out why everybody has this sense of like righteousness, is because they're singing these songs, and songs strike your emotional chords so well. And it's like, here I am, I'll be the savior for humanity for you. I'll be the one that you chose, Jesus. I'll be the one. And it's like, God, are you that special? Like, let's calm down. Let's all figure out how we can all work together to fix whatever problems we have, instead of say that I'm the one that knows where you need to be. Like,
It's insidious. I did a video about the song "Jesus Loves Me." And other songs that we learned on the church bus to church, because there's songs that get stuck in my head, like all the Schoolhouse Rock stuff is there forever. And Monty Python's Universe song is where I go if I want to remember, how far are we from the sun or the center of the universe or the center of the galaxy and stuff like that. And so we know that songs can have an emotional effect, that they're good for teaching things and memorizing things. And then every now and then something gets stuck in your head. Like, so today, I've had 3 songs stuck in my head. One of them is the hello song from a movie called Crazy People, just because if somebody says hello in the right way, it just triggers that song. Yeah. And I'm not going to do it. You're welcome.
Look it up later.
The other one is I Got You, Babe, because it's Groundhog's Day. And as a joke on myself, I played that on a loop as I was driving over here today.
Why'd you do that?
I just have fun. And, I don't hate the song or anything. And the other one... it kind of goes out as a special nod because I haven't been able to get it out of my head, and my brother hasn't been able to get it out of his head since there was a friend of ours who was a little down. And so Brad and I were driving around in a truck, and I was like, she's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm driving around in a truck with my brother listening to, old music from the 70s and stuff. And so she named a song, and we did a Facebook call, and we sang the Spinners' Rubber Band Man, and now that's going to be in my head for a long time.
Man.
You're welcome. And now prepare yourself for the Rubber Band Man.
I actually don't know that song.
Oh, my God. All right, we're going to fix that later. And I did that so well that the algorithms will probably think that was the original song and give us a copyright strike. Where's that copyright strike button there? Right. Anyway, pick out where we want to go and who we want to talk to, and we will get started.
Hermer sounds pretty excited about the Bible.
Yep, there we go. Hermer in Brooklyn, New York. You're on with Jenna and Matt. How are you?
Hi.
Oh, I'm fine. Hi.
Hello?
Yeah, I just wanted to... hello?
There's some weird echo.
Should I put on speaker?
No, I wouldn't, but if you're listening to the stream, you should not be anywhere near that. But go ahead. What's the question or comment?
Yeah, I wanted to argue that the Bible is for science and not against it.
What do you mean for science? You like the Bible is in favor of we should do science?
It supports science in some way.
Okay, I don't care.
Oh, okay, but can I share my thoughts?
Well, given that it's hard to hear you, and I've never said that the Bible doesn't support science in some way, the point is that some of the claims in the Bible are in opposition to the findings of science.
Yeah, but in the book of 1 Timothy, chapter 6, it says avoid any oppositions to science.
It said what?
It says avoid oppositions to science.
There's a void.
1 Timothy, chapter 6.
Here, let me pull it up.
He's looking it up.
In the King James Version.
Yeah, okay, well...
How do you know that's the good one?
Don't
mind me.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem I'm having is that there's some kind of weird echo or whatever. But which verse?
One chapter 6.
That's the chapter. What verse?
No. 1 Timothy 6 verses 27, I believe.
Verses 20. Well, there is no 27.
No, like somewhere in the end it says avoid oppositions to science.
Okay.
James Version.
I'm looking. But let's just say you're right. Avoid opposition to science. What's that mean?
That means to not go against science, to like support science in any way possible, to keep the world going.
Okay. Well, is it to keep the world? I don't know. But
so because it says that means that everything in this book is proven to be scientifically accurate. That's what that means, just because it says that.
I think.
That's what you
think?
think?
Not only that, Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt.
And you think that actually happened?
Yep.
What evidence do you have that Lot's wife was turned to a pillar of salt?
Yeah, but my sweat tastes like salt too. And every human in this planet, sweat tastes like salt too.
So because you think that sweat... Hold on. Let's see if we're following you real quick, because there's a lot of echo. Are you saying that because sweat tastes like salt, that means that a person was turned into salt?
Yes, in the past, but not now.
Yeah, that's not science you're doing, and it's nothing remotely like science.
That is science. It's supernatural science.
There's no such thing as supernatural science. That's people making claims about the supernatural and labeling it science, but that's not what science is. Science is necessarily based in methodological naturalism, and so it doesn't make proclamations about the supernatural at all. And the fact that sweat may taste salty in no way demonstrates that a book that claims that Lot's wife turned into salt is accurate.
I mean, to me, I think it's accurate.
Okay. Well...
Can you prove it?
I can't prove it, but if you see me face to face, I believe I could show that God exists.
How?
Why would it need to be face to face? And to answer Jen's question, how?
Because God could somehow shed his light on me, something like that.
Something like that. That's proof?
I mean, yep, that's proof. If you see me face to face, I believe you'll see the proof of God's existence.
Wait, say that again?
Have other people seen you face to face?
Yes, they have seen me face to face, and they believe that God exists.
So literally everyone who's ever seen you face to face believes that God exists.
Correct.
Wow.
But my head turned back, and they knew it was irrational. Just like when Lot's wife had her head turned back.
Does it only work in person, or could you like post a YouTube video and then everybody could see your face and we'd all be convinced that God exists?
I'll prefer in the street. Someone see me face to face in the street, and they'll see that God exists.
Oh, so you're walking down the street, and literally anybody who's seen you walking down the street believes in God?
Yes.
Wait, do you seriously believe this stuff? Are you kidding?
I don't think that you're serious.
I'm serious.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for calling.
I don't think that for somebody to say that they sincerely believe that they're walking down the street and therefore everybody that they look in the face believes in God.
Yeah, I don't believe, well, it's hard to say that somebody doesn't actually believe something, because you have no idea whether or not somebody's particularly stable or rational, or we're just taking live calls here.
That's true.
And there's almost nothing that someone could call, this is Poe's law, to say you couldn't come up with a fake belief about religion that would be impossible for somebody to believe. But science, or the scientific methods, first of all, they don't make any claims for or against the supernatural. They just don't get to consider it. There's nothing that is like supernatural science. It's this study of the supernatural isn't in the realm of the sciences yet. Maybe it will be once somebody can actually demonstrate some mechanisms or show that things happen. But saying that because sweat is salty, that confirms that Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt. That's just bizarre.
Yeah, and the reason that I'm just skeptical about believing this part is this: we do get troll callers, and so it's not that I think that is just such a ridiculous thing that nobody could ever believe it. It's just that I'm maybe I am saying that. I think that was a troll caller.
Yeah, and so I skimmed through 1 Timothy and didn't find anything, but I also did a quick Google search about what the Bible says about science, and I'm finding a ton of verses. I'm scrolling through rather quickly just to make sure that I, don't get it wrong. But here, it's a website talking about what the Bible has to say about science. Mm-hmm. And I'm not seeing anything that's remotely from 1 Timothy yet. There's a ton of little passages that people are... Oh, there's one in 2 Timothy, except that's not about science. So this is a Christian website that is making a list of what the Bible has to say about science. And they went with 2 Timothy 3:16, which is the all scriptures breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness. That has nothing to do with science. Mm. And so now even this source here is dubious. So yeah, I couldn't find the verse you were talking about.
Well, the call screener wrote that they said that they've called Talk Heathen before and they think he's genuine, that he's brought up the wife and sweat thing. So it's just hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I skimmed through. There's also a message here. 1 Timothy 6:20. Oh, Timothy, keep that which is committed to thee by trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and opposition of science. Mm. That's a letter from Paul to Timothy saying, don't oppose science. Cool. And the thing is, he called in because he seemed to think that we thought the Bible was telling people don't believe science.
Yeah.
And that's not a position I would have ever advocated for.
It's just not a resourceful thing that I would go to if I wanted to learn about science.
Yeah. And so when it comes to, instruction to not stand in opposition to science, maybe you should do some studying about scientific methods and how we go about testing stuff, because at no point would any reasonable scientist say, hey, you know what? Sweat's salty.
Right.
I think that confirms that Lot's wife, because what's the connection to Lot's wife and the story? And none of that. We're spending way too much time.
Well, but just to be fair, just because it could have been a genuine caller, and if it is, I'm sorry that I wrote you off. But maybe look into the biology behind sweat and why it tastes like salt. And if maybe talk to a biologist, or maybe get on, a scientific research site and try to figure out if it is possible for a human being to turn into a pile of salt, and if there's any evidence for that.
Yeah. For me, it's like when they say that the rainbow is proof of the flood. So here's the thing for him to think about. Before Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt, was sweat salty? Are you suggesting that God turned Lot's wife into a pillar of salt, and from then on, and it would have been nice maybe if in the Bible it said,
I see what you're saying.
And that is why sweat is salty. And it still wouldn't prove what he thinks it proves.
No.
All right, where are we going now?
Yoel has brand new proof.
There we go. Yoel in Brooklyn, New York has a brand new proof for God that is guaranteed to turn us all theists. Is that an exaggeration, or is that what you really think?
Well, first of all, hi, how are you?
I'm all right.
Good. Thanks.
That's great. Good to hear. Like, I feel a little like a God, because I can see you, you can't see me. Hopefully after the call you will be able to see God.
Maybe.
Well, okay, so, it says you have a brand new proof for God that is guaranteed to turn us all theists. So is it guaranteed or not?
I haven't said the word guaranteed.
Okay.
But I guess the one that actually wrote it down actually felt that way, so I might be wrong. It's right.
Okay.
Okay, great. And by the way, if in case you will get convinced, I guess you will have to change the show name to from atheist experience to theist experience. But I would suggest you should keep on the show, because it's a lot of fun so far.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome.
I suspect it's getting ready to be a lot of fun here in just a second.
Hopefully. I actually do appreciate very, very much your rational and logical approach.
Sure,
and actually, I'm trying to appeal to.
Well, let's get to your proof.
But before I want to start about it, I just want to make sure.
Why is there a before? We just chit-chatted. Why is there a before? Why can't people just present the proof?
No, I wanted to present the proof. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page of what we call the Big Bang. Is there a problem with that? If you have a problem with it, I'll just skip that.
Okay, go ahead and make sure we're on the same page with regard to the Big Bang. Is that what you said?
No, but about the Big Bang itself. Most people have a question about how can something come from nothing, and I just want to I want to make sure that understand fully.
I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that that's what's happened, nor do I think it's particularly relevant.
Yeah, but exactly. Basically, what I'm trying to say is basically that there's a difference between the question something coming from nothing is actually, as I say, it's not even a question at this point, because all we know usually, like our typical experience is about nothing. It's totally different than a Big Bang nothing.
I have no experience. I have no experience of nothing. I don't know that it's possible to have any experience of nothing, because anytime we would attempt to have some experience with nothing, or detect a nothing, or investigate a nothing, we're applying attributes to it, and now it's no longer nothing. So when people talk about
yeah, right. You're saying exactly what I want to say. Okay, go ahead.
No, I just want you to get to the proof, because the thing is, so my quick take on Big Bang cosmology, it in its current state, it is the current best explanation for the facts that we have observed about the universe. It doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't make a declaration of something from nothing. I don't know how you could have a something from nothing, but you're here to essentially prove God. So prove it.
Yeah, but exactly. I just want to make clear that point. I mean, the difference between
hold on. Are you trying to have a whole philosophical conversation about how the Big Bang works as like a side conversation before you give us the proof?
That's what I wanted to do. But if you have a problem with it, I can go start because it's relevant actually to the proof.
Well, let's get to the proof. And if there's a problem with a definition or whatever, we will try to interrupt as politely as possible and get clarification.
No problem. I will go direct to the definition. But first of all, let me make a definition of God, actually, what we will try to prove, I guess.
Okay.
Okay. I will give it in a layman definition, then I will try to explain more rigorously. Okay. First, the layman definition is there exists a being that is perfect and also the first cause.
It is a being that is perfect and what?
It is the first cause.
And is the first cause.
Yeah.
The first cause.
That's interesting. So potential objections, I'm going to let you continue, but there's potential points here where I'm not clear on what you mean by perfect.
Exactly. That's what I'm going to define rigorously. Just as a layman definition. Okay. Any exception beside that?
Well, also, to assert that it is the first cause, this is just the definition of God. Cool. I'm not convinced there is any such thing as a first cause, but that's what you're going to prove. So keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, let's get it rigorously. First of all, I said it's a being, the three things. A being that is perfect and the first cause. For the being, what I mean by being is like objective reality, not just the subjective, and not just like not what you just explained originally, that not is just a relative thing and we don't know about it.
Okay, pause. For some reason, I'm having difficulty understanding, and I don't think it's. I think it's a mix between audio issues and. Is English your second language, or third language, or fourth language, or?
Again?
Is English your primary language?
No, it's not my primary language.
Okay, and kudos to you, because your English is already better than any other language I would even attempt to speak myself. I'm trying to get clarity. So you're defining being, but for me, when somebody says being, I just recognize that as a thinking agent. I don't have to have any conversation at all about objective or subjective, so I'm not quite sure why you're talking about that.
So if you were comfortable with being, whatever you define is okay. I just tried to define like rigorously, like a technical definition in science and mathematics, but it's okay. As long as you understand it, I'm fine with that. So let's go to perfect. This is one we had issues with that. So let me try to explain what perfect is. And the explanation of perfect means is independent from something else. Like unlike us, we are all dependent constantly.
No.
Independent on something else?
Yep.
Okay, so here's another thing. You start describing being, and all of a sudden the words objective and subjective are coming out of your mouth, when that has nothing to do with being in any philosophical discussion or any discussion I'm aware of. Now we get on to perfect, and the definition that you just gave for perfect would be better applied as not contingent. That's not perfection. You're just declaring that it's not contingent on anything else.
That's what I consider the word perfect. But if you want to use it with another term, I have no problem with that.
Sure. So then, if we're just agreeing to use different terms, then
no. This is
I just said it's a layman term. I would use it with the layman people, and they would understand it. But if you're more technically inclined, use whatever technical word.
I'm going.
Explain it a little bit more.
I'm going.
Call it whatever name you feel more suitable.
I'm going for clarity. Here's what I don't understand. You have an argument, and you have terms, and you have definitions for terms. So you presented it's a perfect being that is the first cause, and then you tried to define being in a way which doesn't fit with my understanding of it. I launched an objection, and you're like, okay, we'll go with your definition of being.
No problem.
Hang on. I'm still talking.
Okay.
Then you go on to define perfect, and you define it in a way that, based on all my understanding, doesn't match with perfection, but it was a definition of something that's non-contingent. And when I raised that objection, you're like, okay, we'll go with your definition of this. This is... Stop. Okay. I wasn't done talking.
No problem. Sorry for that. I'm sorry.
This is raising all kinds of red flags, because if you're going to create a proper argument, it should be, here are my terms, these are the definitions, this is what I mean when I use these terms, and then here is the argument. It should never be, here are my terms, here's my definition, but we'll go ahead and use yours anyway, and then here's the argument. Do you see the problem here?
Not really. I'm sorry for that, because as said, I can only say my terms and my definition in order to proceed. But if you have a better word that you feel would help you understand it more, you can use it for yourself. I will still continue to use my words. That's exactly what I said.
Okay.
So maybe you have when I'm saying perfect or being, you have something else in mind.
Well,
I just can't explain what I mean. That's what I said.
I get it, but I'm trying to we can't go forward if we're not on the same page. And so if somebody said, hey, there's a perfect being, in my head, I'm already thinking about a thinking agent and wondering what we specifically mean by perfect. But when you described your terms, for being, you talked about, for perfect, you described something that was not contingent. And for being, it was something that is objectively real. Nothing in your definition of a being included anything about a mind or agency or any of that.
No, I'm not including that as part of the word being or perfect, clearly.
Well, can I think that I understand what you're trying to say when you use the word perfect, because, so for example, okay, so this is the problem, is if you were to ask me what a successful person looks like, Matt and I are going to have completely different definitions of what a successful person is, right? So that's where we're kind of getting lost. But I think I see where you're going with this perfect being non-contingent or independent, because if you were to ask me what I think like a perfect thing would be that it's no longer growing, and that would mean that it's, essentially dead or whatever, which would mean that it's no longer dependent on anything. Like if we're growing, we need other things to fuel us. We need things to keep us going. So is that kind of what you're saying?
It's a good example, but it's a little bit hard to explain because we're actually talking about something that's not found. It's completely different than everything that we experience and we know. But let me give a different way of explaining it. Maybe that will help you understand. I would say when you say that it's perfect, I would say it's like independent. It is in the default state, or it's default state. I mean, everything in the world, we don't have really a default state. You can say whatever you call default, but it's not a true default state, because our true default is not to be. That's what our default state is in the world.
How do you know we have a default state?
That's exactly what I'm saying. We don't have.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying that this thing that I'm talking about is actually in its default state,
which means it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's where I go to. Okay, so we're in non-existence. So that's
it was about being, that it is actually existing. That was actually a meant with being.
So it's a non-existent being.
No, that's exactly said. That being means it exists, and that's what I want to prove.
This is what the frustration was. A minute ago, you just said that our default state is not being, and that.
But I'm going to show you that there is a being that is actually in a default state.
Stop! Let me finish my fucking thought. I sat here and listened to all that.
Sorry, I was thinking
Oh my God!
Okay.
I'm not saying that our default state is the same as this perfect being state. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you say our default state is to not exist, you are already wrong. Because if I don't exist, there's no me and there is no default state. So the default state for me must necessarily include existing. You can't say the default state for X is not existing. And now you're going to try to argue for something whose default state is to exist when I would argue that my default state is already to exist.
Are you done? Or can I answer already? Or hello? I can't hear you anymore.
Because I stopped talking.
Oh, you want me to already continue? I mean, I'm not.
I'd like you to address what I said.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure that you finished because earlier I was thinking you're already done, and so but you was talking.
Okay,
so now you know what it sounds like when I'm actually done. Things get quiet.
Okay, no problem. You were quiet then for a second, but okay, I will wait longer. No problem. Okay, so basically, as I will try to explain it to you, basically is when I'm saying that our default state, you can call our default state to exist, but actually there is no real default state. When I'm saying default state, I mean with lack of anything else.
Wait, there's no real default state, but this is what?
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. There's no real default state.
What the fuck does any of this have to do with proving that God exists? Let's get to that, because everything that you've said is, as far as I can tell, wrong or conflicted. You can't say there's no default state, but our default state is this, and now I've found something else that has a default state that is something different. Do you have an argument? Do you have it like written down with premises in a syllogistic structure?
Yes.
Get to it.
What I'm trying to explain to you, but since you have a problem to stand what I'm saying, I'm not exactly sure we can proceed.
Okay, so
just if you have it written down as a fucking syllogism, get to it.
No problem. I will go ahead and I will try to prove that. No problem. I will go ahead and you understand.
What is premise one?
Okay, I said that there's a being that being by being mean existence, objective reality. That is actually a thing. But perfect, I'm saying as perfect because it's independent of something else. I mean, it's in the default state, which means default by avoiding everything else.
Stop.
It's a natural default. Okay.
Do you actually have a syllogism written down with premises? Because that is not a first premise. And if the thing you're trying to prove is that there is a perfect being, you don't get to use that as a premise.
Why not?
Because it's the thing you're trying to prove. And if the thing you're trying to prove is your first premise, your argument is necessarily circular and therefore fallacious.
Okay, well, let me continue. But I have not.
Wait, do you understand what that means?
So, no problem. Okay.
Do you understand what that means?
No problem. Okay, no problem. I will go.
Yoel.
Oh, no problem.
Yoel,
Yes.
do you understand what that means?
I understand what he means, but I have not done. I'm not yet done with the definition.
So then how? Okay, so do you know?
I asked you for the first premise. Do you have it?
What do you call the word premise? I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, you need to go study logical syllogisms because you cannot make an argument and call in and tell me that you have an actual syllogism with premises and then say, what's a premise?
Not exactly sure where you're trying. You want me to start with the arguments before I define what exactly I'm trying to argue?
I'm saying you don't have the first clue how to make a valid and sound argument. And before you call in to do so, you should probably go and study what a valid and sound argument is. It is an argument where the structure is such that true premises would necessarily lead to a true conclusion, and it is sound if the premises are accepted as true. And so you have premise one, all men are mortal. Premise two, Socrates is a man. Conclusion, therefore Socrates is mortal. Your premise one, when I asked... Goodbye. Okay. I'm going to hang up. I swear to the God you think is fucking real.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yoel, where did you get this?
I figured it out on my own.
Yeah.
So where did you use to figure it out?
A lot of reasoning and a lot of studying.
Studying what?
Science.
What does that mean?
Science, physics.
So when you were building this syllogism, when you were building this proof for God, what were you using? Because you can't just say the word science, and that doesn't really tell me anything.
No, and what I was using in this personal, my logical argument.
Yeah, for this argument, what did you use? Where did you get it? Or what did you use to create
arguments. These are my arguments.
From where?
I figured it out on my own.
I'm
not taking it from anywhere. It's my own arguments.
So you've never looked up the structure of a syllogism?
I haven't done it to send it in a mathematical journal, but I do have the structure of what I'm saying. The problem is I can start saying, but since you don't know my definition of God,
you will actually
have a hard time seeing what I'm going through. So that's what I tried to first give you my definition of God.
Well, the thing is so I've been learning actually from Matt and others about the structure of an actual argument rather than just going with, I feel like this is true and I feel like this kind of makes sense. And so then that must make it logical. But logic is actually a thing that you can add up. There's an actual structure as if it's a math equation that you can use to figure out if your argument is in fact proven.
100%.
So do you know what that is?
My argument.
Do you know what that is?
My argument. I just tried first to give my definition, what I'm trying to.
Okay, so where did you learn about that?
I'm saying it's my own definition.
So you didn't learn about it from anywhere. You didn't learn about how to structure an argument from anywhere. You just made it up?
What do you mean by I didn't learn how to structure an argument?
Where did you learn how to structure an argument? I've seen
a lot of arguments, a lot of scientific and mathematical proof, and I like them very much.
So where did you learn how to structure an argument?
I'm not exactly sure what you're asking.
He didn't. He didn't. He never has. That's the problem. You have no idea. You have no idea how to structure an argument, which is why on multiple occasions when I asked you for your first premise, you instead went on about the very thing you're trying to prove.
So I'd recommend maybe going and looking up online how to structure an argument. And then there's going to be a ton of articles there. Try to find something that ends in .org.
Okay. Can I repeat a second what I'm just trying to say?
Sure.
If you want me to skip the step of definition, which I think is crucial, I can go straight to the arguments. I have no problem with that. The premises and whatever you want to call. But whatever. If you don't want me or want me to hang up, then it's no problem. Whatever you decide.
So how long has this call been going now? And all I said from the beginning was present your argument. And I said that when we started going down the definition road, we had some objections or disagreements, and you're like, fine, do whatever you want. And then I said, okay, it's best if you just present your argument, and if there's some point of contention or something that needs clarification, we can interrupt you as politely as possible to try to get it then. And then I asked for the first premise or for you to present your argument, and that's when we find out that you don't know what the hell a premise is at all or how to structure an argument. So what reason will we have?
No, I do know how to structure an argument.
No, you don't.
A lot of proof.
No, you don't. You've already demonstrated
what the word premise exactly means.
Okay.
I was thinking it's the definition.
Okay.
You want the definition first.
Yoel, I'm going to pause right now, and I'm going to let you talk, and I would like for you to present your argument, and as soon as it leaves a properly structured argument, I will just hang up. Is that okay?
Okay.
Do you understand? I want to know if you understand why it's important that it be properly structured. And
we can talk about that after I hang up.
Okay.
Present your argument.
Okay.
I fully understand why you want it to be structured.
Present your argument.
Follow it. No problem. Okay. Basically, when we look in the universe,
Goodbye. No argument starts with basically when we look at the universe.
Yeah.
So there's a reason why, and I don't require everybody to always be prepared to present an actual syllogism, premise 1, premise 2, conclusion, or multiple premises that lead to a conclusion. But if you don't have any understanding of that, then that means that you don't know anything about fallacies, that you don't understand anything about a logical structure and why we actually rely on it. Because ages ago, when it comes to like propositional logic and syllogistic logic, Aristotle and his band of merry logicians went through all the potential possible forms and named them, things like Barbara and Celerant and things like that. And it is about a major premise and a minor premise and the connecting terms, and determined which structures, and this is how we get to validity, which structures are such that if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. Or more accurately, if you accept that the premises are true, you must accept that the conclusion is true, or you are now being illogical, irrational. They also showed which structures are invalid in structure, where even with true premises, the conclusion isn't necessarily true. And we make use of that because if your argument is fallacious, which means invalid in structure, a formal fallacy, we have no way of telling if the conclusion is true or not. If you construct an invalid argument, it doesn't matter. It's a complete waste of time to let someone go through an invalid structure, because whatever conclusion they reach, you will have zero way to tell whether or not the conclusion is true. It's Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, peanut butter's awesome. That's invalid because the terms in the conclusion have nothing to do with that. It's not the only, there's tons and tons of fallacies. But peanut butter may or may not be awesome, but because the structure is invalid, you don't know. That is the importance of understanding this. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody calls in needs to present this strict syllogistic structure. But if you're going to make an argument, essentially a premise is, here is item 1, that is this fact. Do you agree or disagree? Are you accepting that this is true? It's not, basically, when we look at the universe, that's just not going to get us anywhere. So all you have to do, if you have a proof of God, is to spend a day looking into logical fallacies and logical syllogisms and try to put yours into as close to a structure. You can still have conversational thing. You know, how would I argue on behalf of, I don't know, these are roasted crickets. I don't have to do syllogisms. I can say, okay, here are some various data points that we can take, and maybe these are real crickets, maybe they're not. I am already convinced that these are most likely real crickets because they say roasted crickets. I know that this is popular. I know that we did some, or at least a new thing that's on the rise, and we talked about it. You can go through all this, and they look like crickets.
We've seen crickets before.
We've seen crickets before. These could be, though, completely fake. I mean, these crickets might not be real. And so one of the things that you could possibly do is to taste it.
Mm-hmm. You ever eat one of those fake grapes?
Yeah, except that I don't know what an actual cricket tastes like. Mm. And so I could taste this, and I could say, well, that doesn't taste like a cricket. It tastes like peanut butter. That's pretty good.
Hey.
I don't know if it's a real cricket or not still, but it does not taste bad.
A little chalky.
There's a little aftertaste
at the end.
There's a little aftertaste at the end of it. Have I done anything to show that it's actually a cricket? No, but I've made a case. Oh, good, drink it down. Mm-hmm. I've made a case for why it might be reasonable to presume that, but we haven't actually demonstrated that this is the case. A lot more needs to be done. And so if you want to prove that a God exists, if you don't come with something like, here are my various facts and here's how they weave together to get to this conclusion, you haven't done anything. And if it's impossible for you to put your argument into a properly syllogistic structure, there's no way for us to analyze it.
Do you remember the day that I met you?
Probably not.
Yeah, I didn't think so. You were here, and I came up to you, and I was like, can I give you a hug? And you're like, well, yeah, I love hugs. And then I was like, you taught me what a fallacy is. And you just kind of looked at me like, okay. And I was like, but that was such a huge thing for me because I had never heard that word before. This is a little bit over a year ago. I didn't know what a fallacy was.
Yeah.
And so then after I started looking it up, I'm like, oh my God, I do that. Oh, I do that too. I do that too. I do that. And I was like, oh my, I need to start all over again. So
start from scratch.
I recommend if you are learning how to build your own structural argument and you want to know if it's actually flawed or not, maybe look up, like Matt said, what fallacies are. And that might be very helpful to show you how easy it is to be tricked.
Yeah.
Because there's so many little, like a little twist here and just a tweak there, and all of a sudden the whole meaning of it completely changes.
Yeah. I'd say the best thing to do is run over to Wikipedia and look up validity versus soundness. There's a pretty good article there, or there has been, to cover the difference between validity and soundness. And there'll be links to other things, and follow those around and spend a day soaking that up. And then there's also websites like Your Fallacy Is that will go through logical fallacies and help you figure those out. But at the end of the day, I don't know how much of the problem was one of language or definitions. But the reason there were red flags right off the bat is if I say, here are my definitions that I'm going to be using in this argument, and whoever I'm talking with says, oh, that's not how I understand that term. As a matter of fact, what you just defined has a different term. You can say, okay, use whatever term you want in your head, but here's what I mean, and that's important. So on that front, he's right. But if you are so non-standard, it's like, I'm going to say peanut butter is awesome. And by peanut butter, I mean little insects that crawl around on the ground. And if you roast them and pull their legs off and add a little salt, that's what I'm going to call peanut butter. All right, well, now we've already departed. Because to me, that's cricket. Okay, fine, just use cricket in your head. But know that when I say peanut butter, you should translate that to cricket. That's too much. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing this for being and for perfect, and who knows, maybe you're doing it for exist as well. Oh, by exist, yeah. I don't mean it actually exists. I mean it's a concept in our heads. Yeah. There's a lot of work left to be done. Anyway.
Just at that point, realize that if you don't know what it is that you're thinking of, maybe you don't know what it is that you're thinking of.
And it would be fine, except in another circumstance. Like, you can feel free to email in and try and make your argument as structured and as simply as possible. But I don't feel like, I mean, we've been on for 50 minutes and have taken 2 calls, and we spent forever trying to get to anything that was close to an argument. And it would seem to me that if there were an actual argument for the existence of God, one that is virtually guaranteed to convince us and turn this into the theist experience, it should have taken about 2 minutes to get through the initial argument so that we could start asking questions.
Yep.
Well, what do I know?
Keep trying, please.
Let's go with Sean in Alabama.
Hi, Sean.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Jenna.
Hi.
How are you guys today?
Pretty good.
Yeah, it says here that you're also wanting to prove that God is real, and it's because he sent you a soulmate?
I believe I can do a much better job than the last guy.
Okay.
Okay. I'm starting to wonder if maybe I would almost take bets on some of those, except that when something is as confused as that last one, who knows? Go ahead. What's your case for God, Sean?
Okay, I should make my definition of God. I think the one true God is been defined in every religion is the same God. I believe that every religion has their own way of explaining the same God that there is.
Okay, so we already have a big problem here. I don't know if you know it, but there are currently thousands of different religious views about God right now. And in the history of the world, there have been even more than that. And some of them have characteristics for their God which are in conflict with others. So they can't all be right. Are you just saying that there is... hang on. Are you saying there is some being and all of these religions are trying to describe it and none of them have gotten it right yet?
I think so. That's what I believe.
Okay, so if none of them have gotten it right, how do we know there's anything there?
It's more likely that if they can't all be right, that they're all wrong, according to Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah, they cannot all be right because they say competing things. It is possible that they could all be wrong. What I'm saying is, if your view is that there's a God there, but no religion has gotten it right, how can you possibly know that there is a God there? Because for each possible God characteristic, there's disagreement. And so if we can't tell which ones have gotten it right, then we can't ever conclude that there's something there.
There's absolutely no way to discern which ones were closer than the others. It is my belief that coming out of the trees as apes that we consumed hallucinogenics, and people saw things that they did not understand and just made stories up. That is my
So I'm gonna let you get to your soulmate argument here in a second, but I really need to hammer this point home because now you've added another thing. So essentially,
sorry about that.
You said there's no way to know
Absolutely not.
Which one. Okay. So that means there's no way to know that this thing exists or any of its properties or characteristics, which means anything that you believe about it is nothing more than a speculative opinion, which isn't rooted in any actual evidence. Why would you believe things that aren't rooted in evidence? And then you come up and suggest that, when we came down from the trees, we took hallucinogenics and didn't understand things, and that's where God comes from. So now you're coming up with what you think is the most reasonable explanation for the thing that you say is unknown, which you believe despite no evidence for it. Do you see why that's a problem?
I do. I absolutely do. There's absolutely no way to prove that.
But yet you also called to prove it, right?
I can prove as to why I believe it, and I think when you hear my story, you'll believe it too.
So you can prove that you believe it, but you can't prove that we should believe it?
When you say...
No, I cannot prove that you should believe it. I believe you will after you hear my story.
All right. So the thing that you think we will believe, is that, do you think we will agree with you about God, or do you think that the thing we'll believe is that you believe it? Because I'm willing to believe you believe it now without any discussion.
I bet I can change your mind.
So you think that we will believe in your God after you tell us your story?
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Let's get to it. Let's get it going. This floor is yours.
Okay. Well, I joined the Navy in 1999, and I got sent to San Diego. San Diego, we went down to Tijuana every weekend. We'd go down there, and I met a beautiful young lady down there, but she was working in a place that I did not expect to find a wife. And I came back home, and I prayed about it, and God said, open your Bible. I opened my Bible, and he pointed me to Ezekiel 23:20.
Oh, my. No, this is a big fucking joke, and you're going to Donkey Show, aren't you, Sean? Thank you for completely wasting our time. As soon as you said Tijuana, and as soon as you were amenable to what you could prove, I was like, because in my head, I'm thinking, this better not be Donkey Show. And then you go to the verse in the Bible. Oh, congrats.
I feel like I shouldn't ask.
And actually, he's wrong because the passage he's actually referencing is in Solomon. So it would have helped if you looked it up. Or no, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that one is in Ezekiel. But there's a Bible verse basically describing a woman having sex with men whose penises were as large as horses or as donkeys, and the ejaculate was like that of a horse, or vice versa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's real.
So she was working in a place where I wouldn't have expected to find a wife. Well, okay, it's a big joke, so I'm not going to spend any more time on it. Let's go to Brant in California. How are you?
Yeah. Am I talking to Matt?
Yeah, you're on with Matt and Jenna, and we apologize for keeping you waiting while somebody tried to make a really, crappy joke.
Well, I was kind of thinking, well, you guys were going to think I'm crazy because, I say strange things. But then you went into the Donkey Show, and I'm saying these guys are crazier than me.
Except he wasn't real. He was just trying to make a joke.
Yeah, so anyway, do you know what the Native American church is? You ever heard of that?
Roughly. Is that the same one that's like using ayahuasca and stuff?
No. Ayahuasca is it's something that belongs to South America.
Okay.
Native American Church belongs to North America.
Sure.
We don't put up with mixing medicines. The one we use is Lobifora willemsi, commonly referred to as peyote.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
It's mescaline, not DMT.
Right.
But I know about ayahuasca, although I'm in this other way. But basically, I'm going to start out because you really have to understand what God is. And if you can't agree on what God is, then you can't really say, let's get rid of it.
Let's get rid of it.
I don't know what to get rid of.
The thing is, so I'm not. So, all right, go ahead. We'll get there.
My primary statement is, if there is a God, then it's beyond our human understanding and knowing.
Okay, how did you reach that conclusion? Because I don't know. Basically, you're saying that if someone claims to know or understand God, this is not possible, and I don't know how you concluded that.
And furthermore, why would you continue pursuing it if you can't understand it?
If you go, I'm not going to give you every tribal representation, but I'll pick some of the favorites.
My question has nothing to do with any tribal representation. It is a question of epistemology. How did you determine that the only way that there can be a God is if it is fundamentally unknowable to humans?
This God, the Wakantanka, is the idea is that God is a great mystery beyond our understanding.
Okay, Brant.
It's not always beyond our understanding.
Brant, so you're talking about a specific...
It can evolve.
Earlier, you said essentially that you'd have to understand God, and that God isn't understandable. But now you seem to be talking about a specific God and a specific concept that this God isn't understandable. So I'm trying to understand, are you saying that it is impossible for there to be a God and for humans to have some understanding of it?
No, I'm saying that humans have to evolve in their awareness in order to have this God become something direct. But
wait.
It's not a singularity, it's a binary concept.
Humans have to evolve. Wait, so are you telling us what can happen in the future, what's going to happen? That we're going to evolve and then we will understand?
No, it's an individual thing.
Okay, so you're using evolve as a metaphor.
Yeah, evolve as a metaphor.
Sure. And so what you're really saying there is that an individual human has to learn to understand a God.
Yes.
Okay.
You just said that we can't.
Conscious.
It's impossible.
So I'm curious as to what is this proposed path that one must follow to learn to understand God?
Well, there's some natural things that go on that are part of all of this. And I'm going to tell you about the hypothesis that led me to understand far more than I did before. And
why can't you just answer the question about what is this path to understanding God? Because that's the only thing that matters. What's the path, and how do we know that it is the path to understanding God?
Human beings have to develop certain characteristics.
Which characteristics, and how do you know this?
The basic layout goes, charity, hope, faith, and love. Now, you're going to have a problem with faith, but I'm not talking about gullibility or confirmation, because you can only have faith in truth.
No. Okay.
We're going off a little tangent.
Do you just mean confidence in truth?
No, it's not confidence.
Okay, what do you mean in truth? What is it in truth that I need to have?
Okay, it is an agreement. You encounter truth and you agree with that truth. You are in that agreement. You're in harmony. It's a harmonious situation.
How do you tell what's true?
Huh?
How do you tell what's true?
By the harmony.
Wait, so if there's no harmony, then that means that whatever it is false? So, like...
harmony between what?
They're disharmonious.
Harmony between what?
Huh?
Harmony between what?
Between yourself and the truth. If
but
you can't be harmonious in what you recognize as truth, then it can't be truth.
Okay, it is true that I am holding my glasses between my first two fingers of my right hand.
Yeah.
Okay. That is true to the best of my ability to discern truth, and I am in agreement with it. Where's the harmony? Are you just saying I agree with it? I have confidence that it's true?
The harmony starts with I have faith that you are holding your glasses.
No, you can look at the damn screen.
You have evidence.
You have evidence.
No, I only have a phone right here.
Okay,
I don't have a screen.
At some point you can go back on YouTube and show that I'm actually holding it.
But he actually told you that he was holding his glasses, so that counts as evidence.
Okay, so
yeah.
Okay, so right now I have right now I have put down my glasses and I'm now holding a pen between my first two fingers. And do you just have faith that that's true too?
I'm going to trust you until...
That's a mistake, because I'm still holding my glasses. I don't even have a pen on the table. So this is the problem with you talking about a harmony with truth.
That's the thing, is you can be wrong. That's the point.
Yeah, you can be.
Right. So why should we believe you?
I won't ask you to believe me.
You are. You're describing a path and telling us what characteristics humans need to have to find and know God. And we're wondering, how did you come by this path or characteristics, and how can we know that this is correct?
I'll have to tell you a really very short story in order for you to understand it.
Why didn't you lead with that?
Well, I think he tried to, but go ahead. Tell us your short story. I will say that in the entire history of sound epistemology, never have we had to begin with, here's a fucking story. But go ahead.
But, okay, once upon a time, far, far away, there was something laying as if asleep. All of a sudden, it took a breath. It breathed in. And as it breathed out, it began to awaken. Now, this is not God. This is just a story. But basically what it tells you in the story is that once upon a time, far, far away, that's space, something was laying as if asleep. That's matter. It took a breath in. That's motion. And as it breathed out, it awakened. That's intelligence. Those are the natures of God right there.
How do you know?
Can you prove it?
See, that's why I have to identify myself as a theist because, well, time does exist, right? Motion exists, matter exists.
No, those are labels that we describe
all of those
things with.
Exist.
No, they don't.
Now,
everything that you just listed is everything you just listed is an abstract concept that doesn't exist independently. It is the labels that we put on things that we observe. We observe motion. We observe interactions. We describe it that way. But what I'm asking you is, you told a story, and then said that this is basically a description. First of all, you said it wasn't God, and then you said it was a description that was God. And when we asked how do you know? Because you could have started with a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I did that on purpose just to be a idiot.
Okay, then let's stop all that, Brant, because if you have some understanding of God and some understanding of how other people can understand God, why can you not just tell us how can we have an understanding of God, and how do you know that this is the way to get that understanding?
Well, there's another equally short story.
And we'll hear it from somebody else. Oh, I'm sorry. I pushed the button.
Well, no, I was just going to say that when you start with all these stories and you're trying to say that you have evidence for a God, then we're talking about reality. So when you start telling these stories and starting them off with once upon a time and far, far away, you're just making it look even more silly to us because it already looks like a silly story. And you're not helping your case when you do that.
Yeah, so you told a story, a poem that was potentially an incredibly beautiful metaphor.
Deep, insightful.
Seems really deep. And all we cared about was, is it true and how do you know it's true? Because there's countless stories like that describe all kinds of different things or could be interpreted in such a way that they describe all kinds of different things.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing. When you tell a story like that, you can interpret the breath as anything. You can interpret the movement as anything. Like you can interpret however you feel like it at that time. And that doesn't mean that, therefore, what I feel is true and you have to believe it too.
And the more ambiguous or poetic the tale is, the more prone it is to interpretation. Because what you described could have been describing, I don't know, the origin of the universe. Or it could have been, a dragon sleeping, and it's when you start adding those details to the poem, now all of a sudden you're making proclamations that this is a story that's going to lead us to a truth. And we're not saying you're wrong. All we're saying is, how do you know that that's leading you to a truth? How do you know that the truth that you've discovered is true?
Yeah,
and you can't just talk about, faith, but not the faith you're talking about. By faith, I mean harmonious with the truth. Well, from a philosophical standpoint, truth may not even be attainable. There may be no way to say X is in fact true. We may be forever blocked at just based on my current understanding of the universe that I apparently inhabit. This seems to be the case. And that's why, for me, the definition of truth is that which is compatible with the universe that I experience. Now, obviously, within this universe, that includes truths like delusions and hallucinations and things like that. And we have the ability to discern some of those things. But if you're just going to come with a poem, once upon a time, and, there is a path to God, and it starts with charity and harmony or charity and faith and hope and love, I think, or whatever. I mean,
but God is love.
I've been charitable. I have hope. I think hope was one of them.
Faith, hope, and charity.
I love, and I have tried to be harmonious with the truth. And one of the ways that to whatever extent I'm clear on the understanding of that, one of the ways to be harmonious with the truth is to have rigorous standards of evidence such that you want, like I say, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And you have to have both parts of that. Because if you want to believe as many true things as possible, you just believe everything. And if you want to believe as few false things as possible, you believe nothing. So what I'm saying is I want my map of reality in my head to match reality as best as I can. And I do it knowing I'm going to make mistakes, that we all make mistakes. But one of the ways to minimize the mistakes you make is to not go by interpretations and stories and here's how I feel about it. Or, and I'm sure I'll get emails about this as well, I'm going to get high on peyote or ayahuasca or whatever, and then I'm going to have an experience and I'm going to reach the conclusion that this experience I had leads me to some bigger truth, something that I couldn't have understood without the drugs, something that I couldn't have understood, set the drugs aside, something I couldn't have understood without hearing that story and sitting down thinking about it, being a contemplative. That's not a reliable path to truth. Just like you taking it on faith, whether or not I'm holding glasses or a pen, is not a reliable path to truth. One of the two of us has rigorous standards to try to be as consistent and harmonious with the truth as possible, and the other one doesn't. Yeah. And I guess that's the heart of it. We got several godless heathens waiting. William in Omaha thinks that he can prove that there is no God. So this will be fun because
that's interesting.
I'm probably going to disagree with you too. But welcome, William.
Hi.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Jenna. Thanks for taking my call. Matt, I wanted to ask you about that card magic book you mentioned earlier because I'm an amateur magician too, and I didn't get a chance to write down the name.
You should already know it. It's The Expert at the Card Table by S.W. Erdnase.
The Expert at the Card Table. Thanks. And Jenna, I just wanted to thank you. You were you were somebody who helped me find a secular therapist for my anxiety.
Oh my God!
So I just wanted to give you that thanks up front.
Oh, thank you.
Hooray!
Yeah. So to the meat and potatoes.
Okay.
I think I can offer a deductive argument that there is no God.
Absolutely no God anywhere. How are we defining God?
Okay, so I'm going to add some nuance there because you're totally right. With any good logical argument, there needs to be definitions. So I'm defining God to be an all-knowing being. And any God that fits that sufficient definition would be part of the scope of this argument.
So let me play. Let me play pocket apologist for a second.
Okay.
By all-knowing, are you going to argue? So modern apologists, when it comes to the omnis, would say...
You want my definition of knowledge?
Well, hang on. Would say that God knows everything that can be known, that is not logically inconsistent. That maybe there are some things that cannot be known, but they couldn't be known by anyone, God or not. So if you're going to argue that there's something God couldn't know or for a contradiction, modern apologists would just say that doesn't do anything because God has all knowledge that is possible. And that's what makes it unfalsifiable.
Yeah. I have heard that. The way I'm going to structure this argument is I'm going to talk about knowledge as justified true belief. I understand you have a different definition, but for the sake of what I'm talking about,
sure.
I'm just going to use justified true belief.
Go for it.
And what I'm saying is an all-knowing God is a God that knows all true things and has a justification for all true things that it knows.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is a proof by contradiction. It's a way of structuring an argument where you use an argument or a premise that you're trying to disprove.
Right, reductio ad absurdum.
And then show, P implies not P implies not P.
Gotcha.
So my first premise is that the incompleteness theorem holds. The incompleteness theorem is a mathematical theorem that I've learned about at my time at university. And it basically states that no axiomatic system is complete and consistent. For the sake of what we've kind of been talking about on the show, or what you've been talking about on the show, rather, consistent can just mean sound for the sake of what we're talking about. So no axiomatic system is complete and sound. If... Excuse me, I'm just going through my notes. The second premise would be there is an omniscient God. So those two things, you could come to the conclusion that the incompleteness theorem necessarily has to fail. So the theorem initially proved that piano arithmetic is impossible to be completely understood, in the sense that there will always be questions that we will be able to ask that cannot be answered within the math system that we're working in. So if there is, say,
this isn't going to disprove that God. So first of all,
if God knows everything, then he knows all of piano arithmetic. And if he knows all of piano arithmetic,
unless it is unknowable, that's the point. God knows everything that can be known. If, for example, if the incompleteness theorem is in fact correct, which, you know, it's one of those things that you couldn't prove anyway, which is why it's, in any case, if there's something that cannot be known, then you can't use that to...
the incompleteness theorem.
You can't use that to say God could know, because God can't know this, therefore God isn't all-knowing. Because that's why I was trying to point out at the beginning that modern theologians would argue that God knows everything which can be known. And so if something can't be known, then God doesn't know it. It's just like, it's the same as, it's these very primitive notions of, oh, God is all-powerful. It's a bit of hyperbole, because you could say, oh, well, can God create a rock so big he can't lift it? Can God create a burrito so hot that he can't eat it? And so modern theologians recognizing this and saying this doesn't in any way disprove a God. All we're saying is God has all power that is possible. God has all knowledge that is possible. So you're not disproving any God that anybody actually is advocate, or that most anybody would advocate for in any serious context.
Oh, I totally agree with that. And I just want to say, I want to endorse street epistemology as a way for actually convincing people. I think this is just an interesting deductive argument that concludes that there are no omniscient gods. And if I was engaging with an actual believer, I wouldn't use this argument because it's not very convincing. But I would say that
so
I would disagree with you on the point that you say that God or that most people would say that this doesn't count because it's not possible. Because really what we're doing when we're doing mathematics is we're trying to discover what kinds of axioms we want to use as we're going forward in working in mathematics. And the point of the incompleteness theorem is that there's always going to be some axioms that you would have to add on to your set in order to answer any given question.
So basically,
if
you called in to present an argument that you don't think is going to be convincing, that definitely does not address the best versions of God from actual thinking people, not like the man on the street, the person who doesn't know anything about philosophy or fallacies or contradictions or anything else. I don't want to argue. I certainly wouldn't spend time constructing an argument against that any more than I would spend time trying to put an argument together about somebody's belief that pixies are, the core structure at the center of the Big Bang. So it seems like this is just a big waste of time.
Arithmetic.
It seems like this is just a big waste of time. You are presenting an argument that you acknowledge isn't going to be convincing to the man on the street, and certainly isn't going to be convincing to anybody who has any better understanding of God. So what's the point?
Well, I was just kind of calling in because I think this is where you and I may disagree. I feel comfortable calling myself a Gnostic atheist because I believe that this proof or this argument is a way to demonstrate that there isn't a God that
No, it's not.
Basic arithmetic.
It's not a God. It's not an argument against any sort of God that is beyond kindergarten theology. That's what you've disproved, and this shit was dealt with centuries ago.
Well, the incompleteness theorem wasn't proven.
You didn't need it then. All you needed was can God create a rock so big he can't lift it? Boom. Oh, wow. Well, that's not what we meant by omnipotent. And the same thing applies to omniscience. You're essentially saying,
fair enough.
You're saying we've discovered that there are things that can't be known, and therefore if somebody says there's a God who knows everything, that God can't exist. Yeah, so what? We already knew that.
Okay, yeah, that's a fair criticism. I would say, as with any logically deductive argument for the existence of God, you necessarily have to use the God in the premises, and then that leads to people redefining what they mean by God. Just like the problem of evil is a
Right, but
sound argument if
you've constructed an argument against something that hasn't been a serious presentation for a God in centuries.
Okay, I mean, if like that is okay. That,
did you bother? So one of the things is, of course, it's not going to be convincing, but it's also irrelevant, because if you're going to sit down and you're going to have a conversation with somebody who has bothered to look into any of this, they're going to say, "At what point did I say that my God knows everything, including things that can't be known?"
Well, but clearly there are some things in axiomatic systems that can be known because we know them.
Okay, then God knows those things, but he doesn't, pointing out that he can't know some things that can't be known.
But if he knows some of those things, there necessarily must be a question within that framework that could be asked that he would not be able to know.
And nobody would be able to know it is the point. If there's an unknowable, if there's a question for which it is, the answer is unknowable, then God wouldn't know it either. And so what?
Well, okay, so if that's a fair point. You make a really good point, and I definitely wanted to have any fallacies pointed out if they're there. And
it's not so much a fallacy. It is, you are arguing against a definition that has already been kind of tossed out ages ago, with even before we had Gödel's incompleteness theorem and other things, because it's like, can God make a married bachelor? These things which lead to a contradiction, which is why for ages, theologians have offered that, first of all, it's difficult to point to anything. Like, let's take the Bible. The Bible doesn't say that God is omniscient, omnipotent. None of those words are in there. It suggests that by suggesting that God knows all things. At no point does it suggest God knows things which are unknowable. It's just God knows things that we don't know. Like, the theist would come back and say, God understood Gödel's incompleteness theorem before anybody and before it had ever been thought of or suggested. That's what we mean by a God being essentially all-knowing.
Well, I see what you're saying. But what I'm trying to say is that if God and I could come to some agreements, like, say, the Peano axioms of arithmetic, there would be some questions that I would be able to pose to God that he would say, I don't know.
Would you know the answer?
I guess, of course not.
Okay, so how is that an argument against God knowing all things that are knowable?
Well, I don't have to know all things that are knowable. God has to know all things that are knowable.
But if God told you that there was an answer, how would you prove him wrong? How would you prove him wrong?
Well, there does have to be an answer. A proposition is either true or it's false.
No, a proposition is either true or not true.
Okay, yes, true or not true.
And
technically,
what it is,
logical negation.
What it is doesn't mean that we know what it is, and whether or not you or I know or understand what it is doesn't mean that. And if in fact we think that we can't know, then essentially we're saying that if an answer is proffered by someone else, that answer must necessarily be unfalsifiable, at least in theory now, by us, which doesn't prove that God doesn't know all things that are knowable.
I agree with you. Maybe if I gave a more concrete example, what I'm saying might be a little more clear. So there is a proposition in mathematics called the Riemann hypothesis, completely unknown if it's true or false, but it could be put into a propositional statement. And you and I would agree, probably, that it's either true or not true. We don't know the truth.
I can agree that now.
Yeah, and so if God knows all things, he would know the truth value of that claim.
How do you know
that? If it's knowable, if the truth value is knowable, whether or not something has a truth value is independent from whether or not that truth value is knowable.
Can you say that one more time?
Whether or not something has a truth value, which everything would in the true, not true, it is independent from whether or not that truth value is knowable.
Yes.
And whether or not we know is independent from whether or not a God knows. And so all of these things don't line up to the point where the only God that you can disprove with an argument like this is a God that has been already defined in such a way that it's susceptible to logical contradictions. But if modern theologians are saying that God has all power that is not logically impossible, or that God knows all things that are knowable, then that removes that contradiction, the potential from it. It makes God unfalsifiable. So if you try to claim that you're falsifying an unfalsifiable God, you've already made a mistake.
I don't think that's exactly what I'm trying to say.
No, so, you're trying to define God in such a way that it's falsifiable and then falsify it. But your definition of God is problematic.
So, okay, I hear what you're saying. What I'm trying to say is, excuse me, let me gather my thoughts for a second. I'm just looking at my notes. What I'm trying to say is that as mathematicians, we want to add on axioms, and in the situation where we don't know the truth value of something, mathematicians will sometimes say, well, if we add this on as an axiom, if we assume it's true or assume it's false, what happens? If we're talking about any kind of system, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'm getting a little flustered. I may have to call back later.
Okay. It's one thing you might want to dig into whether or not it is locally true versus globally true, because there are things that are true within a system that aren't true outside that system. So, but in any case, essentially, if somebody,
but even if you,
essentially,
no matter how many axioms you're on. Sorry.
If somebody defines their God, you're trying to build a straw man and knock it down of a particular God. Big deal. Mm-hmm. That's a piece of piss. Nothing to it. Been done many times before. How would you show that an unfalsifiable God? How would you falsify the unfalsifiable? And if modern theologians would say God knows everything that is knowable, and you don't know what is or isn't knowable,
you can't know.
You can't show that God can't know things that are knowable. Wait.
Can you say that last part one more time?
I'm not sure that I said that exactly correctly. If they've defined their God so it knows everything that is knowable, that's an unfalsifiable proposition.
We don't know everything that is knowable.
Because we don't know what's knowable. But if they say God knows everything that's knowable, then you would have to show that there's something that is knowable that God does not know. And how can you show what God does or doesn't know? Because if you know it, wouldn't God know it?
If I knew it, then God would know it, yes.
So this thing fails at several different levels.
So how I know the axioms of arithmetic, God would also know those axioms, right?
And the ones that you don't know, you can't prove that God does or doesn't.
If you know it, then by definition, something that knows whatever is knowable knows it too.
Yes. Okay, yeah. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. If I know something and there is a thing that knows all things, then of course that thing would also know that.
If anything is known or knowable, they're saying God knows that.
So I think this kind of plays into why I wanted to use the justified true belief definition of knowledge.
Doesn't matter what the definition of knowledge is. Anything that is knowable is they are proposing that God knows it. How could you ever show that God doesn't know something which is knowable?
Well, okay. Yes, if you narrowly define the God outside of I see what you're saying. Yes, you can change your definitions of what God is, and to be able to get out of any argument you choose.
Which happened a very, 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 very long time ago. What you're trying to do is to build a straw man of a God in order to knock it down, and that's the reason why you already recognize it's not going to be particularly convincing, because it doesn't map to what people believe or what the best thoughts about a God are.
Okay, I mean, okay, I see what you're saying. I guess like with the people who I'm interacting with, they do kind of have, I mean, this idea that God could know everything that. Well, okay, I won't say that. I don't want to put words in somebody else's mouth, especially because they're not here to talk to you.
But if they're wrong about what God can know, and you can show that, are they going to stop believing in a God, or are they going to redefine God such that God knows everything that's knowable, and not that God can create a burrito so hot he can't eat it?
Well, of course they're going to redefine what God is. That's why I'm having this conversation with you instead of with a theist.
Well, no, you're having a conversation with a former theist, and you're having a conversation with somebody who cares about making sure that we're arguing against the right thing. You might, if you walked in and you said, God makes the sky pink 24/7, and I can prove that God doesn't exist, what good does that do?
But people believe in gods that know all things.
No, so... Oh.
They say that.
So first of all...
Until you start questioning them specifically, like, can he create a burrito so hot he can't eat it? And then they say, well, he knows... That's when they justify it as they go. And they've justified it over thousands of years, and they've justified it. And so they've basically found every straw man that there is and found a way to define it in a way that it is unfalsifiable.
If you ran across someone who believes the thing, then your argument would be fine. However, no, most of these people don't know what they believe. They haven't given it any thought. And you're not arguing against anything that represents good, rational thought. You might as well be saying, well, the village idiot down there believes that the earth is flat. So if I can show him the earth is flat, I've proved that, or show him a fallacy in his argument. This is almost the fallacy. What you're arguing against is somebody's concept of God in their head, and then suggesting that if they refine that concept, that all they've done is lead the evidence where it goes. And all they're really doing is acknowledging that, they had expanded God beyond the realm of what is logically possible, and now they're going to put it back in the box. But you haven't disproven a God at all.
I hear what you're saying, and like I do get the criticism, and it is valid. But isn't that kind of the nature of a reductio ad absurdum argument? By the end, it does look absurd.
Yes, that's the fucking point. And so if you said there's a God who makes the sky pink, okay, William, I'm going to call into your show and say I can prove there is no God as long as we define God as that which makes the sky pink 24/7. Oh, nobody believes that. Well, there's a guy down the street over here who believes that God makes the sky pink 24/7. Therefore, I've disproved God. No, you haven't. You've proved that guy is wrong.
So I would agree that I haven't proved it to that person, but in the sense that I have supplied I hear what you're saying.
I'm done. We're past time. I got to go.
Thank you for calling.
Have a good one.
There's 3 more atheist callers on hold, and there's a show coming up, and we want to get to Discord. There's pizza and stuff here. Quick notes. First of all, thanks for tuning in. My apologies that we're not going to get to the other callers because we're going to do a quick Discord thing. There's going to be food here. This is the Atheist Community of Austin, the Free Thought Library, which is open 7 days a week from 11 to 9. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come down. On the other side of that wall are the folks who make this show happen regularly. All of our crew there taking your calls and doing the video and the audio and all that stuff. If you have questions, you can always email tv@atheist-community.org. If you have prayers that you want to have answered, you can send a postcard, care of God at Atheist-Community or Atheist Community of Austin, 1507 West Koenig Lane, Austin, Texas, 78756. And if the picture on your postcard is pretty enough, it might be a way to bribe God here and into giving you an actual yes. On that note, thanks so much for tuning in. And what's the Mark? Give me the announcement because are we airing it on this channel next? Nonprofits is going to be starting right after the show's over on their own channel.
Cool.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.